You can't park here. This spot is restricted.
This parking's for judges. I'm a judge. I work here.
You don't look like a judge.
I am. You can check my information.
I need to see some ID.
Judge Elijah Brooks parked his car in his assigned parking space behind the Riverton City Courthouse. This lot was reserved only for judges. His name was already listed on the parking registry, and he had parked there many times before. He turned off the engine, grabbed his briefcase, and stepped out of the car like he did every workday. Before he could lock his door, a voice snapped from behind him. "Hey, you can't park there." Elijah turned around slowly. A white police officer stood a few feet away, arms stiff, hand resting close to his belt. His badge read, Officer Daniel Hargrove. The officer's eyes scanned Elijah from head to toe, not with curiosity, but with doubt. "This parking lot is for judges only," the officer said. Elijah nodded calmly. "Yes, officer, I'm a judge. This is my assigned spot." Officer Hargrove let out a short laugh. "You don't look like a judge." That sentence landed hard. Elijah stayed composed, though his chest tightened. "I am Judge Elijah Brooks," he said evenly. "Courtroom 3B. I can show you my ID." Before Elijah could fully pull the ID from his jacket, the officer raised his hand. "I don't need to see it," Hargrove said. "You're lying." Elijah froze for a second, surprised not by the accusation, but by how quickly the officer had made up his mind. "Officer," Elijah said carefully, "please just look at the ID. It will clear everything up." Instead of taking it, Officer Hargrove stepped closer, his voice getting louder. "Step away from the vehicle, now." "For what reason?" Elijah asked. "For illegal parking and impersonation," the officer replied. "Impersonation?" Elijah looked around the lot. It was quiet. No one else was nearby. No witnesses stepping in, just the officer and him. "I'm not resisting. I'm asking you to verify my identity." That's when Officer Hargrove grabbed Elijah's arm and twisted it behind his back. Pain shot through Elijah's shoulder. "What are you doing?" Elijah shouted. "This is my parking spot." "Stop resisting," the officer yelled, even though Elijah wasn't fighting at all. The cold handcuffs snapped shut around Elijah's wrists. "Now pause right here. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if this story already has you shaking your head, like, subscribe, share, and hype this up so more people hear what really happened." Officer Hargrove pushed Elijah Brooks through the courthouse doors like he was hauling in a criminal caught red-handed. The handcuffs were tight, biting into Elijah's wrists with every step. People inside froze. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Shoes squeaked against the floor as heads turned. Elijah had walked these halls for years. He had sworn people in. He had sentenced criminals. He had defended the law. Now he was being dragged through the same building in cuffs. A young court clerk stared at him, her eyes wide. "Is that Judge Brooks?" Another employee whispered. "Why is he arrested?" Officer Hargrove didn't lower his voice. In fact, he raised it. Man refused to move his car, tried to pretend he was a judge. That word again, pretend. Elijah finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Officer, you are making a serious mistake." Hargrove scoffed. "Save it." They reached the security desk. Sergeant Linda Moore, a senior officer with years of experience, looked up. The moment she saw Elijah in cuffs, her face changed. "Hargrove," she said slowly, "why is Judge Brooks restrained?" The room went silent. Hargrove blinked. "Judge what?" Sergeant Moore stepped closer, staring directly at Elijah's face. "Elijah?" he said. "Yes, Linda." Her jaw dropped. She turned sharply toward Hargrove. "You arrested a sitting judge?" "He parked illegally," Hargrove said quickly. "He wouldn't comply." Elijah lifted his cuffed hand slightly. "I offered my ID. He refused to look at it." Sergeant Moore didn't hesitate. "Uncuff him now." Hargrove hesitated, clearly shaken. "Sarge, Now," she repeated louder. With stiff movements, Hargrove removed the cuffs. Deep red marks circled Elijah's wrists.
Several people in the room noticed. Someone quietly pulled out a phone. Sergeant Moore exhaled slowly. "Judge Brooks, I am deeply sorry." Elijah nodded once. "Thank you." Hargrove stood frozen, sweat forming along his hairline. "I didn't know," he muttered. Elijah turned to face him fully for the first time. "That's the problem. You didn't want to know."
That sentence hit harder than a shout. Word spread fast. Within minutes, courthouse staff knew what had happened. Lawyers whispered, clerks texted. A bailiff shook his head and said quietly, "This is bad, really bad." Elijah was escorted to a private office to recover. Someone brought him water. Another offered ice for his wrists. He declined the ice but accepted the water. As he sat there, the shock began to fade, and anger slowly took its place. He thought about how easily this could have gone worse. What if he had raised his voice? What if he had moved too fast? What if there were no witnesses inside? Let me ask you something real quick. How many times do you think this has happened to people who didn't have a title or a courtroom backing them up? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Later that evening, Elijah went home. His wife, Naomi Brooks, noticed the marks on his wrists the moment he walked in. "What happened to you?" she asked. He told her everything. The parking lot, the words, the cuffs, the walk through the courthouse. Naomi listened quietly, her face tightening with every sentence. "He didn't even check your ID?" she asked. "No," Elijah replied. "He decided who I was before I spoke." Naomi shook her head. "That wasn't a mistake. That was bias." Elijah sat down heavily. "I keep thinking about how normal it felt to him, like he's done it before." Naomi placed her hand over his. "So what are you going to do?" Elijah looked at the red marks again. "What I always do. Follow the law." The next morning, formal complaints were filed. Internal Affairs opened an investigation. Security footage was pulled. Witness statements were collected. The city tried to stay quiet, but the story refused to stay buried. By the end of the week, local reporters were asking questions outside City Hall. Headlines began forming, phones started ringing, and Officer Daniel Hargrove realized something important. This wasn't going away. The city tried to quiet things down at first. Officials called the arrest an unfortunate misunderstanding. Police spokespeople avoided saying Elijah's name on camera, but the truth had already escaped, and once it did, it ran fast. Security footage became the turning point. A nearby office building had cameras facing the judge-only parking lot. The video showed everything clearly. Elijah parking calmly, Officer Hargrove walking up aggressively, Elijah holding out his ID, the officer pushing it away without even looking, the cuffs, the force, the walk inside. No shouting from Elijah, no threat, no resistance, just refusal from the officer. When the footage leaked to the press, public anger exploded. People didn't need commentary. The video spoke for itself. Community meetings filled overnight. City council rooms overflowed. Parents showed up with their kids. Seniors leaned on canes. College students held signs that read, "Verify before you arrest," and "Respect is not optional." Let me ask you, if this video never existed, do you think the truth would have come out the same way? Be honest in the comments. Elijah stayed quiet during the noise. He didn't go on talk shows. He didn't shout into microphones. Instead, he hired a civil rights attorney named Rachel Monroe, known for being sharp, calm, and relentless. Rachel watched the footage once, then again. Then she looked at Elijah. "This is not just about you. This is about abuse of authority." The lawsuit was filed the following week. Wrongful arrest, false imprisonment, civil rights violation. The city was forced to respond. Officer Hargrove was placed on unpaid leave. Internal Affairs questioned him for hours. His statements kept changing. First, he said Elijah refused to cooperate. Then he feared for his safety. Then he claimed he didn't see the ID clearly. The footage destroyed every excuse. Witnesses stepped forward. Court clerks testified that Elijah had entered the building peacefully. Sergeant Linda Moore confirmed she ordered the cuffs removed immediately. Even another officer admitted Hargrove had a history of jumping to conclusions. The courtroom during the civil trial was packed every day. When Elijah took the stand, he didn't dramatize anything. He didn't raise his voice. "I didn't want special treatment. I wanted equal treatment." The city's lawyer tried to argue that Hargrove made a reasonable mistake. Rachel Monroe stood up calmly. Is it reasonable, she asked, to refuse to elicit someone while refusing to look at their ID? Silence. Is it reasonable, she continued, to decide someone doesn't belong because they don't look the part? The jury didn't look confused. They looked angry. After days of testimony, the jury went to deliberate. The city waited. Officer Hargrove waited. Elijah waited. When the jury returned, the courtroom went silent. The foreperson stood. We find the city liable. A pause. Then the number was read aloud. $780,000. Gasps filled the room. Some people whispered. Others nodded like they already knew this was coming.
Instant justice. The judge ordered the city to pay every dollar. Within days, Officer Daniel Hargrove was fired. No appeal, no quiet transfer. His badge was taken, his gun turned in. The city released a statement promising reform, but promises don't erase damage. Elijah stood outside the courthouse afterward, reporters calling his name. He raised one hand, asking for quiet. This was never about money, he said. This was about dignity. Let me ask you something important. Do you think losing his job was enough for the officer, or should there have been more consequences? Because the case may have ended in court, but its impact was just beginning. The verdict didn't just shake the courtroom, it shook the entire city. Riverton city officials scrambled. Emergency meetings were called behind closed doors. Lawyers warned the mayor that this case would follow the city for years. Community leaders demanded answers, not statements. The police department moved fast, but not fast enough for the public. Officer Daniel Hargrove's termination became official. His name was removed from the department's website, his locker was cleared out. His badge, once a symbol of authority, was boxed up and locked away. But for many people, that wasn't the real damage. The real damage was trust. Parents began having hard conversations with their children. Teachers talked about rights in classrooms. Church leaders spoke openly about fear and fairness. People weren't just talking about Elijah anymore. They were talking about themselves. Elijah returned to the courthouse quietly. No cameras followed him inside this time. He walked the same halls, but the energy felt different. People stopped to nod. Some thanked him. Others simply looked relieved. One clerk said softly, "You spoke up for all of us." Elijah shook his head. "I spoke up because I had to." Behind the scenes, policy changes began rolling out. Officers were now required to verify identification before making an arrest in restricted areas. Body camera reviews became stricter. Bias training sessions were added, mandatory, not optional. Let me ask you, do you think training alone can fix behavior like this, or does accountability matter more? Drop your thoughts below. The city mailed the settlement check weeks later. Elijah didn't celebrate. He placed it on the kitchen table and sat down with Naomi. "This money won't erase what happened," she said. "I know, but maybe it'll stop it from happening again." Naomi nodded. "That's what justice looks like sometimes." Officer Hargrove, meanwhile, disappeared from public view. No interviews, no statements, just silence. Rumors spread that no department would hire him. Others said he blamed the system instead of himself. Elijah didn't comment on any of it. He focused on his work, on fairness, on the people who walked into his courtroom every day hoping the law would treat them better than it had treated him in that parking lot. And slowly, the city began to change. Not because it wanted to, but because it had been forced to. Look at itself. The lesson was clear. Ignoring someone's humanity comes at a cost, and Riverton City had just paid it. But the story wasn't finished yet, because sometimes the strongest message isn't in the punishment, it's in what comes after. The parking lot behind the Riverton City Courthouse looked the same. Same cracks in the ground, same faded lines, same quiet corners where no one really paid attention. But what happened there changed everything. A new sign stood at the entrance now, clear, bold, impossible to ignore. Judge-only parking. Identification must be verified. It wasn't there before. Elijah Brooks parked his car in that same spot a few weeks after the case ended. He turned off the engine and sat for a moment, looking through the windshield. Not angry, not nervous, just aware. He stepped out of the car and locked the door. No one stopped him. No one questioned him. And that silence meant more than words ever could. Inside the courthouse, life moved on. Cases were heard, verdicts were given. People stood before Elijah every day hoping the law would be fair to them. He remembered how it felt to stand powerless in that same building, wrongly accused, unheard. It changed how he listened. It changed how carefully he spoke. Parents sometimes stopped him outside the courthouse. One father said, "My son saw what you went through. He asked me why it happened." Elijah nodded. "And what did you tell him?" "That standing up matters," the man replied. Elijah smiled quietly. The city never apologized publicly. There was no ceremony, no speech, just policy changes and silence. But sometimes silence is an admission. Officer Hargrove never returned to policing. His name slowly faded from the headlines, but his actions didn't. They lived on in training rooms, in policy manuals, and in warning stories told to new recruits. "Check the ID," instructors would say, always. Let me ask you something as we end this. Do you think real justice is about punishment or about making sure the same mistake never happens again? Drop your thoughts. Elijah continued serving as a judge, not as a symbol, not as a headline, just as a man who believed the law should protect everyone, not just those who look like they belong. That parking space was never just about parking. It was about dignity. It was about being seen. And it was about reminding the city of one simple truth. You don't get to decide who someone is without first giving them the respect of listening.